I went to first live in Japan when I was going on 11 years old. My father was a Lutheran missionary. So I grew up in the 1960s, very unsettled time. And as you may know, there was a group called the counterculture, people who were looking for alternative ways of understanding the world and how we could perhaps change the world. And my answer, I found, was in Buddhism. And that interest began in high school. In Japan, I went to high school in Japan, in Tokyo, the American school. I came back here for college. I majored in history. My research paper, my senior paper in college was about Zen. So I had an interest in Zen, but it was quite, I have to say, it was intellectual. I mainly knew about it through reading. When I got out of college in 1972, that was the absolute worst year of the Vietnam War. Like many of the so-called hippie generation, I thought, well, I'll go back to the land. I'll try and find a community where we'll create the perfect world. Looking back now, that seems laughable, but believe it or not, that's what I thought. But the thing was, I could not find that situation. I ended up going to Central America with the idea of possibly going to live there, make my own life. But then I realized at a certain point, you know, no matter how perfect a situation I had, I knew that that would not be the satisfaction I was looking for. It was at that point that a book about Zazen, a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, a very well-known book here in America, came into my hands, and I realized that was the missing piece. And here was a book saying, look, you've got to sit down. You've got to sit facing the wall doing Zazen. That man who wrote the book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, was a Japanese man. He was in San Francisco. But I just had that sense that rather than going to study in San Francisco, I was going to find something more authentic by going back to Japan. In 1974, I went back to Japan with the idea of trying to find a monastery where I could sit in meditation and find out about meditation and find out about myself. I thought for 6 months, or maybe a year. But that turned out to be rather longer. I ended up being ordained as a priest, well, a monk. I thought of myself as a monk. And I stayed there for more than 25 years, a long time. But one thing led to another. I had an offer to work in Los Angeles, where I was the head priest of a large Japanese-American temple. And then after a certain time, it felt like it was time to move on. I met a woman from St. Louis. Never dreamed I would come to St. Louis, but we decided, rather than her going to Los Angeles, that I would move here to St. Louis. A group of people here in St. Louis heard that I was thinking of coming to St. Louis, and they invited me to be the teacher of this group, the Confluence Zen Center. So that's in a nutshell, is how I ended up here in St. Louis.